Welcome back everybody, it's Garubis here, and today we're going to be installing some water cooling onto my wife's graphics card. So obviously in the past I have installed some water cooling on the graphics card in my gaming PC. However, the difference today is we are actually going to be installing an all-in-one cooler, an AIO, on our graphics card. Unfortunately, because this is a custom PCB, meaning the actual card itself is a custom design, there aren't a lot of custom water cooling blocks that you can install on this card. As a matter of fact, the only one I was able to find was one from AliExpress. It was an off-brand that was supposedly going to fit this card. There's only a couple of reviews and I just wasn't sure if I wanted to trust it. The other nice thing about the solution we're going to be doing today, which I'll be getting to in a second, is that it doesn't require anything else. It doesn't require a pump, a reservoir, or a radiator. That is obviously all included in our AIO from NZXT. So the solution we're going to be installing today is actually the NZXT Kraken G12 along with the NZXT Kraken X62 AIO. The AIO we're using today is a 200mm radiator, meaning it has two 140mm fans. The reason I went with that as opposed to a 240mm was simply because I already had some fans that were in her case that were 140mm and I wanted to be able to reuse them. The unique thing about the NZXT Kraken G12 is that it's a universal adapter for all graphics cards. Theoretically, all you need is this and an AIO that will fit in it, and of course the NZXT AIO is all fit. There are some other brands that are also approved to work with this kit, and I was curious on how it'll work. And since I wasn't able to find a custom water cooling block that I liked, I figured this was the next best option. And at this time we don't have any plans to install any kind of water cooling on her CPU. She's happy with the stock cooling. She doesn't do a whole lot of overclocking or heavy video editing or anything like that. So really we're doing this for aesthetics. Her build is currently an all white, blue, and a little bit of black build, and while this is white and black, it doesn't have any blue on it, and the primary color is black. This graphics card also does not have a backplate, so it just isn't the most attractive card in the world. Now, the G12 kit also doesn't have a backplate, but we figure the fact that it's a white bracket, along with the NZXT Kraken X62, which has some RGB on here, we figured this should do the trick. So I'm excited to get started. This is the first time using this Kraken G12. I've heard a lot of good things about it. I did my research, I confirmed that it will fit this card, and obviously it will work with this AIO. So without further ado, let's get started and get this water cooling installed. Alright, welcome back. So as it is with any kind of water cooling solution, the first thing you need to do before installing the actual kit is to remove the stock cooler. So I'm going to go ahead and get the screws taken out here. I think it looks pretty straightforward. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws on the back. Oh, is there anything under the sticker? No, nothing under the sticker. And then looks like there's 2 here on the IO plate. So those screws look like the only things holding the cooling on. So I'm hoping once I get those all out, it'll just come right off and then we can get started installing our new NZXT kit. The other thing I wanted to mention, way back when I had actually purchased these little copper heat sinks for my graphics card, my Vega 56 that I currently have in my gaming PC. I never actually used them because I realized that my crashing issues wasn't the graphics card, it was actually a RAM issue. For whatever reason, the RAM that I had installed in my motherboard couldn't run at its rated speed. I guess the motherboard and RAM were not compatible. So once I was able to replace the RAM and get some that was compatible with my motherboard, I no longer had crashing issues, and therefore I had these little copper heat sinks hanging around that I never really used. So I figured one of the neat things, or one of the interesting things about the Kraken G12 cooling is the VRMs and everything on the actual PCB other than the graphics chip itself is just cooled by this fan on the back side here. The only thing that's actually water cooled with this kit is the graphics processor itself. So I figure since the water block itself doesn't cool any of the memory, that I can use these copper heat sinks that I had laying around, stick them to the memory, which should aid in the efficiency of the fan in the kit. So I forgot to mention that in the introduction, wanted to mention it here. So let's get started. I'm gonna actually change the camera angle just a little bit, get kind of more of a top-down view of the work as I get it taken apart. Then I'll probably keep it in that view while we do our installation. Without further ado, let's get this stock cooler off the card. All right, so as I mentioned, it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws on the back, and then the 2 screws on the I/O plate to remove, and that should allow us to take the cooler completely off. So let's get those screws out and see what we got. Okay, so we got our 6 screws in the back removed and the 2 from the... Okay, well there we go. So as I was just about to say, we had all the screws removed. Let's see if the cooler comes off. And as I was talking, it actually fell right off. So next is we'll just unplug the power cable for the fans. Set this off to the side. And there we go. That is our graphics card. Next, I'm going to clean up some of these thermal pads just to get those kind of out of the way. All right, with that all removed, I'm going to go ahead and get my rubbing alcohol and paper towels, get the GPU itself cleaned up. I'll probably also clean up these memory chips here. It is 8 gig memory. That's actually where I'm going to be using my heat sinks. Hopefully they will fit around here and we won't have any issues due to the mounting kit itself. So without further ado, let's get this thing cleaned off. And when I'm cleaning off a GPU, because they don't have the hot heat spreader, there is a little bit of thermal paste that always leaks around the sides here a little bit. So I like to use a cotton swab, dipped, of course, in rubbing alcohol, and then just kind of work my way around the edge, freeing up all of that extra thermal paste. Now, of course, you do want to be a little bit careful when you're using that Q-tips around all these little transistors here around the GPU. You don't want it leaving any residue behind. Same goes for the paper towel, honestly. A lot of people recommend using like a coffee filter or something like that won't potentially leave anything behind, but I've always gotten away with the paper towel. So until I have an issue, I don't see any reason why I can't. Alright, there you go. You can see the GPU nice and shiny, cleaned off. I'm going to go ahead and wipe down the memory now, and we'll get the Kraken G12 out of the box and see what it's going to take to get it mounted. And there it is. I think that's about as good as it's gonna get. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the Kraken G12 unboxed so we can hopefully get it mounted and see if we're gonna be able to use our copper heat sinks for our memory chips. All right, welcome back. So like I said, now that we have the stock cooling off of our GPU, the next step is gonna be to unbox our Kraken G12 from NZXT and see actually what it's gonna take to get it mounted. Okay, packaging's very nice. So it looks like here we have some zip ties and some mounting brackets here in a plastic bag. We've got some screws and some foam blocks. Not 100% sure what those foam blocks are going to be for, but I know we're going to find out later on. This is the fan that I was talking about. And then, wow, really not a whole lot to it. This is it. Just a metal bracket, white. Of course, it's got the NZXT. It looks like we do have some instructions here, so I'm gonna consult those and see what it's gonna take to get this thing installed. All right, so it looks pretty straightforward. We are gonna be able to start out with just the NZXT G12. We're gonna get the fan mounted, and then we're gonna get these mounting brackets attached to the card itself. Once that's all done, then we'll be installing our X62 AIO. So I guess I probably am better off just going ahead and getting everything unboxed now. So let's go ahead and get this unboxed as well. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I've never actually used or installed any sort of AIO kit. So even though we're not using it in the classic fashion, of course on a CPU, I am excited to see what it's like to work with an AIO cooler. So I obviously went again with the NZXT1 because it's the same brand as the G12, so I know for sure it's going to fit. But I also went with it because it does have a little bit of RGB on the cooler itself. So let's see what we got here. So we got a couple of nice big 140mm fans. We've got some mounting brackets here that I'm sure going to have to use with the NZXT Kraken G12. We have our power adapter, and this also plugs into a USB port on your motherboard, so that I'm guessing that way you can control the RGB and all of that stuff through the USB instead of having to plug into an RGB header on your motherboard. We also have the power here for the pump and the fans. And then last, certainly not least, since you know it's what really does all the work, we have our radiator. Just gonna sit down like that, and our AIO, excuse me, the CPU block. So you can see here it's got a nice mirror finish on the back. I'm interested to see what that looks like when it's powered on. All right, so that's that. So like I said, I'm gonna set all of the AIO stuff off here to the left. I have all of my I have the NZXT Kraken G12 kit and the GPU over here to the right. I'm gonna get the camera adjusted so you guys have a better view while I do my work. And then we're gonna get started. All right, so now that I have the camera adjusted, let's go ahead and get the kit mounted to our graphics card. So the first step, actually, I'm gonna slide this up out of the way here, is to get the fan mounted to our cooler. Alright, so with the fan mounted, the next step, it appears, is we're going to find out what those foam blocks are for. So, according to the instructions, these foam blocks actually are meant to stick to the top of the fan here. So, let's go ahead and do that. I also went ahead and ran the power cord for the fan out the back. I can see from images that this is actually going to be facing out of our case, meaning this is the front. And instead of having the cord come out the front here and have to wrap it around, or the side and have to wrap it around, hopefully we can discreetly run it into the back of our case around and find a plug on our motherboard for our fan. Like I said in the instructions, it says to peel back the sticker on these foam blocks and to stick them to the top of these two outside screws. Okay, next we're gonna actually mount the mounting hardware for our kit onto our graphics card. Now, because we are using an AIO that was designed for a CPU, it doesn't fit natively on our card. So NZXT shipped these adapter brackets that you have to attach to the card itself. And the one thing you are going to have to pay attention to is there are different brackets, whether it's an AMD or an NVIDIA graphics card. So I'm going to try to identify which ones are which. We do have an AMD graphics card. Again, this is the MSI Radeon RX 480. Oh, okay, and that's how you can tell. So the AMD ones have an A, and the NVIDIA ones have an N. So that's actually how you can tell the difference. Okay, and here are our AMD brackets. So these simply attach here where the stock cooling actually attached, along with these screws from the back and this little metal washer. So I'll try to do this from the side here. So basically, this screw goes through the back of the graphics card and then into our mounting bracket. once these are both started, I'm going to go ahead and tighten them down real nice. So these are obviously what the AIO is going to attach to and create that pressure on the GPU itself for cooling. So definitely want to make sure these screws are good and tight. So I'm going to install this one from the front so you can kind of see how it looks from the other side. And then the last screw going in here on the bottom. And there you go. So you can see here we have the two mounting brackets where the AIO itself is going to attach to the card. So before we go on any further, I remembered I wanted to use these little copper heat sinks to try and help cool our memory a little bit more efficiently. So these actually are kind of nice. They do have a little bit of a sticker on the back, a little adhesive. So I'm just going to go around and stick one on each memory chip. Unfortunately, because these three are directly underneath this bracket, I am going to have to take this side off again. So that shouldn't be too big of a deal. We'll just get this off, get the heat sink stuck on this side, get these stuck on the ones in the back and the one on the side here. So give me just a second and we can move on to the next steps of mounting the actual AIO. There we go. So there's the GPU with all of our copper heat sinks attached to the memory. We have our mounting bracket for the AIO attached to the card. So looks like the next step is to attach the mounting brackets to our AIO so we can then get that mounted to our card. As a matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. The next step was actually to take the mounting bracket here off of our AIO because the AIO is actually now going to attach directly into the Kraken G12. And you can actually see here, they both have a similar design with these little teeth around the edges here where the AIO locks in. So let's go ahead and get the AIO mounted to the G12, and then we'll be able to attach the whole kit to our card. Okay, so like I said, this just clicked right in, no problem. And now with this attached, you get this lined up with the mounting bracket. And they provided these nice screws here that have a little spring on them. And they just screw down here in the four corners. So let's go ahead and get those screwed down. And this is what's actually going to create that pressure on the GPU for cooling. And as always, I like to connect opposite corners. I'm also now realizing after I got started that they want us to have one of these little plastic washers on there. One of these little plastic washers on there as well. So I'll have to undo the first two and get those plastic washers in place. Okay, now that I have all four started, I'm going to go ahead and tighten them down. I'm going to assume, as with most CPU blocks, that these screws will bottom out. So I'm just going to tighten these down until they feel good and tight. I'm not going to try to over tighten them. So according to the instruction booklet, you're meant to kind of shove these tubes back behind the fan here. Then they give you some zip tie mounts here. So I'm going to go ahead and follow instructions and get this zip tied down. One thing I will mention from the very beginning, I had to actually move. Let's see here. Here are the two foam blocks that I was talking about. I had to actually move this one in a little bit because the power connector for the card was getting in the way. So I had to move this one in a little bit so that I could contact the PCB the way it's supposed to. I think those are really just to keep the spacing. I don't think they have any real impact on the cooling, but you know, what do I know? right, now I got the zip tie connected. I'm going to go ahead and cut this. There we go. All right, and then before I leave you here, we'll do the old peel. Give that nice mirror finish. Ooh, look at that. Does appear the little NZXT logo in there, so that'll look nice. And that's it. That's really all there is for getting the cooler itself connected to our card. So the next step now is to get everything mounted over in her case, which, like I said, I think at this point I'm gonna go ahead and just do it off camera. I think there's, again, plenty of videos out there for AIOs getting installed into cases. There's really not a whole lot to it. You mount the radiator and fans to the mounting locations in your case, and you're good to go. Okay, there you have it. We got our G12 mounting bracket mounted along with our Kraken G12, both from NZXT. The next step now is going to be to get all of this stuff mounted in my wife's case. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. Like I said, I think there's plenty of YouTube videos out there with people installing AIOs into their cases, and really this is going to be no different. The only difference is that the tubes from the AIO are going to be going to the GPU as opposed to the CPU. So I appreciate you guys coming out, hanging out with me, watching me install one of these Kraken G12 kits for the very first time. It is honestly a pretty slick solution, especially if you have a card that doesn't have a lot of custom water cooling blocks available for it, which again, this MSI card is one of those cards. There aren't a whole lot of custom blocks out there. Again, the only one I found was on AliExpress, and I think the shipping was almost as much as the block itself. And the other nice thing about doing it this way is I don't have to worry about having a pump res, having to cut tubing, having to get, you know, adapters or anything like that. Everything is all inclusive. It's a lot easier to install. I mean, that's one of the advantages. You're really taking advantage of an AIO and are able to use that on a GPU, which before this, I don't think that was something you could do. So, look forward to getting this installed. Hopefully, she can get a little bit of overclocking on her graphics card, since this is an RX 480. It's obviously got a little bit of time on it. You know, it is a couple years old, and we're hoping to get a couple more years out of it for her. She's not a heavy gamer, so, you know, she doesn't play a lot of the AAA titles, so she doesn't need any kind of crazy overclocks or super powerful graphics cards. So really, we're hoping this investment of, I don't know, probably about 150, 200 bucks, which is what an equivalent card would cost. Maybe I might be able to get like an RX 580 or something like that for the cost, but this way we get to, one, I get to have the fun of installing something new, trying out a new toy, and having this now at my disposal, depending on how it all works. But it also allows us to hopefully extend the life of this card a little bit. So, look forward to getting a couple more videos out as time goes by. I'm not 100% sure what the next one will be, but whatever it is, it'll be good, and I'll make sure to bring you guys along for the ride. So, if you guys like what you see, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. If you don't like what you see, feel free to dislike the video and never watch another video again. I don't really care. Honestly, I'm just doing this because I find all of this technology and IT stuff really cool. I love to nerd out over water cooling and overclocking and all that kind of stuff. I also love playing with new toys when it comes to PC building. So, until next time, cheers, and I'll see you in the next one.